First class was nearly full. Passengers sat comfortably in leather seats, flipping through newspapers, connecting headphones, reviewing menus. The lighting was soft, the hum quiet, that artificial peace where everyone pretends not to see anyone else, and that's when Will Smith stepped on board, wearing a plain dark t-shirt, light joggers, a backpack slung over one shoulder. No sunglasses, no security, no spotlight. A low-brimmed cap on his head, noise-canceling earbuds in. He wanted silence. He was traveling alone. Not for filming. Not for press. Just heading home after visiting a STEM program he privately funded for underprivileged black students in Detroit. That he took his seat in 3A window side. Pulled out his earbuds. Exhaled, but the quiet didn't last, the click of heels. The sharp scent of perfume. And then a voice not questioning, but commanding, "Excuse me, sir. This section is for first-class passengers only." Will turned his head slowly. Standing in front of him was a flight attendant, mid-40s, uniform crisp, posture stiff. But her eyes didn't meet his. They went right through him, cold, flat, presumptive. Will slid his earbuds off. "I'm sorry. Your seat must be in the back." "Let's not make this complicated," she said, with a tone she hadn't used on anyone else boarding this plane. A few passengers turned to look. "This is seat 3A, Will replied calmly. "My ticket." "Sir, I'm asking you to remove yourself from this area before the doors close." The air tightened. Will took out his phone. Pulled up the digital boarding pass. Held it up for her to see. Calm. Direct, she didn't even glance at it. "Don't play games," she snapped. "You know exactly why you're not supposed to be here." His expression shifted, not to anger. To precision. "Tell me," he said, still soft. "Why?" "Because this isn't your seat." "No," he said. "Is it not my seat, or do I just not look like someone who belongs in this seat?" Someone coughed behind him. Another passenger looked down. No one said anything yet. Then she said something worse. "I'm following protocol. You people often misunderstand premium boarding zones." "You people," Will didn't move. He just sat there, and suddenly the silence got louder. "You people," he repeated. "You mean black people? Or people who don't wear suits in first class?" "Sir, if you don't stop, then what?" Will interrupted, sharper now. "You'll call the captain. Kick me off the flight. You want to humiliate me in front of everyone just to prove what? That this seat should be empty rather than have someone like me in it." Now the stairs were open. Someone pulled out a phone. Someone else whispered. But no one laughed, because this wasn't about a boarding pass anymore. It was about a truth they all heard, but only one man had the courage to say out loud. Will didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't back down. "You people," he repeated, this time not as a question, but as an indictment. His voice wasn't raised, but the weight behind each word was heavy enough to silence the row behind him. The flight attendant, her name tag read L. Granger, crossed her arms. Her tone grew clipped, defensive. "Sir, I'm warning you. Either return to your assigned seat or I'll involve the captain and security." "This is my assigned seat," Will said, still seated, still calm. "I showed you my boarding pass. You didn't even look." "I don't have to explain." "No," Will cut in. "You don't. Because your face already did." Passengers were turning now. Not subtly. Full body turns. A few were filming. A man in a tailored blazer on the opposite aisle muttered, "Just sit down and stop causing trouble." Will turned to him without hesitation. "Oh, I'm causing trouble?" he asked. "You've been watching me get treated like a threat since I sat down, and the only thing that bothers you is that I'm speaking back." The man looked away. L. Granger stepped forward again, this time with her hand outstretched like a barrier. "Sir. Please lower your voice. This is a premium experience and we do not tolerate disruptions." Will stood, slowly, deliberately. He wasn't towering. He wasn't looming, but his presence, his truth suddenly took up all the air in that cabin. "You don't tolerate disruptions," he repeated. You mean like being accused of sneaking into a seat I paid for? Being told I don't look like first class? Being called, you people, while the rest of the plane plays deaf? A silence settled, brittle and electrified. Will took a step forward, not toward her, but toward the center of the aisle, where everyone could see him now. Let's be honest, he said. This wasn't about a seat. This wasn't about a ticket. This wasn't even about me being famous. Because you didn't know who I was when you judged me. She scoffed, trying to recover. Sir, you're making a scene. No, he said. You made the scene. I'm just giving it a voice. A few rows back, a woman in business attire quietly nodded, her phone shaking slightly as she recorded. Will's tone deepened. You're not just a flight attendant with a name tag. You're a person in a position of power. And today, you used that power to try and shrink someone. Granger shifted on her feet. Her face tense and flushed betrayed a fear she hadn't expected to feel. Not here. Not in control. You can call the captain, Will said. You can call whoever you need. But just know this: if I step off this plane, I won't be the one answering questions. Granger's voice faltered. I don't have to. Yes, you do. His voice cut through. Because when people like you abuse the uniform, you don't just damage dignity. You stain the whole system. You make every honest worker's job harder. You turn hospitality into hostility. And you count on people like me to shut up and walk away. He scanned the rows of watching faces. I'm done walking away. A flight attendant near the back whispered into her headset. The cabin was completely still now. Will lowered his gaze for a moment. Then looked her in the eye. I didn't start this. But I'm going to finish it. And then he sat back down. Calmly. Deliberately, passengers were whispering now, not about him, but about her, and somewhere in the distance, the cockpit door clicked open. The captain was coming. The click of the cockpit door echoed like a gunshot. A tall man in navy blue stepped into the aisle, crisp uniform, silver wings over his chest, and a face too seasoned to miss tension. Captain Hewitt. 40 years in the air. He didn't speak right away. He didn't need to. The entire cabin watched him like he was gravity.l. Granger stood rigid, her mouth halfway open, as if hoping the captain's presence would save her. As if her uniform would absorb the consequences. She gestured sharply toward Will. Captain, this passenger is refusing to comply with security protocol. He became confrontational and is causing a disturbance in first class. Hewitt raised one hand. That's all it took. She went silent. Then he turned to Will, who was still seated in 3A, hands resting on his knees, eyes steady. Not angry. Not defensive. Just ready. Mr. Smith, the captain said, his voice calm but firm, may I speak with you for a moment? Will gave a single nod. He stood again slowly, like a man who had nothing to hide. A few passengers leaned forward. One woman in the third row whispered, he didn't do anything. Someone shushed her. The captain glanced around, as if taking in the entire emotional temperature of the cabin, then he motioned toward the front galley. They stepped aside. Not far. Just far enough that the murmurs dropped to a hush. I understand there's been an incident, the captain said. There has, Will replied. But I think you already know I didn't start it. I saw the footage, Hewitt said, tilting his head toward a nearby crew monitor. We're not disconnected in the cockpit. We see more than people realize. He paused. Looked Will straight in the eye. She told you to leave because of how you look. She told me to leave because I wasn't what she expected in first class, Will said. That was enough for her. The captain was silent for a moment. Not defensive. Just absorbing it. Let me be clear, he said at last. You belong in that seat. No one, crew or passenger, has the right to question that. Then why did she feel like she could? Will asked. Hewitt didn't answer, because the answer was already in the room. Will's voice dropped lower, so only the captain could hear. You have the stripes. You have the voice. So what you do next, it won't just reflect on you. It will define whether the rest of this flight thinks silence is safer than truth. Captain Hewitt nodded slowly, then he stepped forward back into the cabin, where all eyes locked on him again that he didn't raise his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "there was an incident involving a miscommunication between one of our senior crew and a first-class passenger." The room tensed. Will remained at his seat, arms crossed. "This airline has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind," the captain continued. "And I want to personally apologize to Mr. Will Smith for how he was treated." There was a pause. Someone clapped once. Hesitated, then others joined, not loud, but enough to feel like a turning tide. Will didn't smile. Didn't bow, that he simply nodded once. L. Granger stood frozen at the galley door, eyes wide, face pale. Her hands were trembling, and to ensure this situation is handled appropriately, the captain added, "Miss Granger will be stepping off the aircraft. Another attendant will take her place." Gasps. Real ones this time. Granger looked around in panic. "Wait, you're removing me?" "I've worked here for," but Hewitt cut her off. "You used your authority to make someone feel lesser for no reason. And the rest of us are done pretending that's part of the job." Two more flight attendants approached quietly and escorted her to the door. She left the plane in silence, not a hero. Not a victim, just a reminder. Will looked out the window as the engines began to hum. His hands were calm now. His heart beat steady. The plane hadn't taken off yet, but something had already lifted, not just for him but for everyone watching, because Justice didn't scream. It stood up. It stayed seated, and it didn't blink. She didn't move. The captain had spoken. The passengers had watched. Some clapped. A few whispered, "Finally." But Flight Attendant L. Granger stood frozen near the galley, fingers clenched tight against the beverage cart, jaw locked. Her eyes wide, unblinking, burned with humiliation. Not sorrow. Not remorse. Fury. "You can't be serious," she finally hissed, loud enough for everyone in the front half of the cabin to hear. Captain Hewitt turned toward her. Calm. Firm. "You are relieved of duty for this flight. You will deboard immediately." Her lips curled. "I've served this airline for 17 years, she said through clenched teeth. "I have seniority over both of them." She gestured harshly to the two younger attendants beside her, who instinctively stepped back. "And now I'm being removed because a celebrity didn't like being reminded of the rules." Passengers stirred in their seats. Will Smith sat still. Head up. Eyes locked on her. Silent, but present. "I was following procedure," Granger barked. "You think he's the first man to wave a phone and say he's in first class? I've dealt with worse liars, drunks, people who forge boarding passes. And now I'm the criminal because I expected him to prove he belonged." She pointed toward Will. He was aggressive. He raised his voice first. "No, he didn't," came a voice from the second row, a woman in glasses, holding her phone up. "I recorded the entire thing. You called him, you people, before he even stood up." Granger's eyes snapped to her. "You don't understand what it's like dealing with this job. You made it about his skin," said a younger man behind her. "We all heard it." Granger spun, flailing now. "This is ridiculous. You're all letting him manipulate this whole flight." Captain Hewitt stepped forward. His voice dropped low. "Serious, Miss Granger. I am ordering you, as the commanding officer of this aircraft, to exit the plane. You are no longer part of the active crew." She didn't move. Instead, she laughed. Bitter. Dry. Empty. "You think I'm afraid of being cancelled by a Hollywood actor? I'm the only one doing her job while everyone else bows to a man with $1 million face." "You're not being cancelled," Hewitt replied, "you're being held accountable." Granger took a step forward toward Will. People stiffened. "You should be ashamed of yourself," she said to him. Her voice was louder now. Wounded. Defensive. "You sat there in silence, waiting for someone to slip. And when I made one comment, one mistake, you turned this into a performance." Still, Will didn't respond. She shook her head. "They'll forget this. They'll move on. But I'll be the one blacklisted." A deep voice came from 4C. "Good. She turned that it was a black man in his 60s. Simple blazer. Book in his lap. No phone out. No smirk. I was denied a seat like that in 1973 because of how I looked, he said. And the woman who did it never got fired. She got promoted. He locked eyes with her. This is the part where history stops repeating itself. Granger opened her mouth to respond, but Captain Hewitt raised his hand and pressed a button on his earpiece. Gate control, he said clearly. We have a non-compliant crew member refusing to deboard after formal removal. Requesting airport security. Gasps. This was no longer a policy violation, this was a scene. 2 flight attendants moved to the back of the cabin. One offered bottled water to Will. He shook his head. Thank you, he said softly. But I'm fine. No one spoke after that, because everyone knew, something irreversible had happened. The doors weren't even closed yet, but the woman in uniform had already taken herself somewhere no plane could carry her back from. The engines hadn't even started, the doors were still open, but the entire cabin had stopped breathing. Flight attendant L. Granger stood near the galley, eyes wide, hands trembling, as her control her voice. Her authority, her identity slipped from her grasp like air through broken wings. She had refused to leave, she had shouted, she had tried to turn Will Smith into a problem, and now, silence, until the front door of the aircraft opened again. Fast. With purpose, and the silence cracked. 2 airport police officers stepped onto the plain black uniforms, gold patches, radios clipped to their shoulders. One was tall, with a long stride and steady eyes. The other shorter, older, with a clipboard in hand. They didn't look around for drama, they knew exactly where to walk. Straight to her. Miss Granger, the tall officer said, voice clear. We've been called due to a refusal to comply with the flight captain's order. Please collect your things. Her mouth opened, nothing came out. The older officer checked the clipboard. You've been formally removed from the crew manifest. The flight cannot depart until you exit. She turned first to the captain, then to the passengers. They're seriously doing this, she said. Over a man who finished that sentence, someone from row 3 said, gasps. A few passengers murmured, that's enough. Granger shook her head, then suddenly pointed at Will. He manipulated this entire cabin. He used his fame to make himself a victim. Will still hadn't spoken. He hadn't needed to, but now, slowly, he stood. Turned to her, and calmly said, you told me I didn't belong. Without checking my name, my ticket, or anything about me. And when people stood up, when truth stood up, you didn't back down. You doubled down. And now you're realizing, he paused, that seat was mine. But this fall. It's all yours. The shorter officer stepped forward. Miss Granger now. She blinked hard, tears threatened. But they weren't from shame, they were from pride that couldn't hold up under truth. As she reached for her bag, a passenger stood up from the back. An older woman in a dark green coat, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Some uniforms are earned, some are just worn. And she sat back down. The aisle was a tunnel now. Narrow. Long. Granger walked it slowly. No longer the person who strutted through it just 30 minutes earlier. Now, each step echoed like a verdict. As she reached the door, she turned once more, maybe looking for sympathy. Maybe hoping for one person, just one, to say, you did nothing wrong. No one did, not even the flight attendants she'd once outranked. She walked off the plane, flanked by security, the doors shut behind her with a heavy, deliberate click, and the hum returned, but it was a different kind of quiet now. The cabin wasn't holding its breath anymore. It was letting go. Captain Hewitt returned to the front. He didn't make a speech. He didn't need to. He simply picked up the intercom and said, we'll be taking off shortly, thank you for your patience, and for your humanity. A few people clapped. This time, it wasn't awkward. It was earned. Will Smith sat back in his seat, folded his hands, looked out the window, and this time, nobody dared ask if he belonged there, because everyone knew, he wasn't just sitting in first class. He carried it. The flight was silent for a long time, not awkward silent. Not cold, settled, like the turbulence had passed, but the weight of it hadn't. Every now and then, someone would glance toward Will Smith. Not with celebrity awe but with respect. With awareness that he hadn't performed, that he hadn't exploded, that he had stood. That was enough. The seat beside him stayed empty. No one dared ask to move closer. Flight attendants passed drinks in quiet gratitude. They didn't speak more than they needed to. They didn't need to. Will nodded to each one. Calm, steady, generous, the kind of kindness that doesn't cost applause. 3 hours later, the plane began to descend. Outside, the city lights of Atlanta bloomed like stars against glass. The wheels hit the tarmac gently. The seatbelt sign chimed off, but no one jumped up first. They waited, row after row. Passengers slowly stood, collected bags, shuffled forward and paused when they reached 3A. Some nodded, some whispered, "Thank you." Some said nothing, just looked him in the eye. For the first time all flight will remain seated. No rush, until a little girl no older than 7, walking beside her mother, paused. She looked up at him. Her mother tried to pull her forward, embarrassed, but the girl tugged back and asked, innocently, "Are you the man who made the mean lady leave?" Will's eyebrows lifted. He smiled gently. "No, sweetheart," he said. "I'm the man who didn't let her win." Her mom blinked. Mouthing a silent thank you, she walked on. That moment, that simple moment, echoed louder than everything before it. When the plane finally emptied, Will stood up and stepped off the aircraft. The jet bridge was quiet. Dim. He walked calmly through the terminal. No bodyguards. No cameras. No press. Just him. Just presence. But as he reached baggage claim, something unexpected happened. A group of 5 flight attendants, none from his flight, were standing near a side wall, all in uniform. They weren't talking. They were waiting. One of them stepped forward. She looked tired. Mid-30s. Braids pulled back. A name tag that read Evans. She extended her hand. "Sir," she said quietly, "we just wanted to say thank you. We watched the footage. A lot of us have been trying to speak up about her for years. But we didn't have your name. Your power. Your voice." Will didn't shake her hand. He hugged her. A soft, brief, human hug. "Sometimes," he said into her shoulder, "it takes a spotlight to show what's been happening in the dark." They broke apart. Another attendant, younger, added, "You didn't just stop her. You showed us how not to be her." Will smiled. "Then we all won." He stepped outside. The air was cool. Still. No SUV. No black car, just a quiet sedan waiting by the curb. He got in the back seat, rolled down the window. Took one last look at the terminal. And whispered, "Let them never forget what first class actually means. Because respect isn't stitched into a uniform. It's measured by what you do when no one else has the courage, and sometimes, one man staying seated, can lift everyone else to their feet."